Okay, we're going to take a look at plot analysis, also known as elements of plot. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just change this because really it's elements of plot. Okay, you get to edit with me. All right, so elements of plot, there we go. For fiction. Remember, we're just reviewing, so there may be a few things you've forgotten along the way, but that's okay because we're going to fill in those gaps right now and make everything else about this assignment so much easier since it'll be fresh on your mind. All right, so think about a typical plot diagram that you've seen before. It may look something like this. So this is where we start with the exposition, which is the beginning of the story. We are introduced to the main characters. We learn about the setting, maybe the time period, the location, things like that. And then we start to see the character encounter several conflicts. That's where the rising action occurs. And then the climax or the turning point of the story is where we encounter the biggest problem for the character. It's the part of the story or the movie where you just don't know how the character is going to get out of that situation. Then, of course, when the character does get out of the situation, that's the falling action. And then we come to the resolution or the conclusion of the story. So that's the basic plot diagram, right? Remember? Okay, so if you're in a traditional classroom setting, you could go ahead and copy the plot diagram onto your own paper so you've got your own copy of it. If you're here watching the video, then maybe you're at home watching this or you're watching it in a situation that is outside of your classroom. If you want to grab a screenshot of this, take a picture with your phone, grab a screenshot so that you can go back to it, that's totally fine. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more just to quickly review because we're going to watch a video. In fact, you're going to watch a couple of videos. And so we want to make sure that we've got these terms right there in our heads. Okay, so remember the exposition is where you learn who the main character is and you get a basic understanding of the time period and the location of the story. And it could be literally a time period where you can tell it's, happening in current times. Maybe it happened a few decades ago and you can tell by the way the people are described or the way they dress. If you're watching a movie or video, you can see it for yourself. But it's just a basic time period. You might even be able to tell if it's like daytime or nighttime, something like that. And you get an idea for the location of the story too. You may be lucky enough to get an actual city or state, or it could be more like is it a country setting? Is it a fairy tale setting? Is it a science fiction type setting, right? City setting, something like that, beach setting. So that's the exposition. Okay, then we've got a little something called the inciting incident. This is where the rising action starts. It's actually a situation or an incident where we get the first clue that something is a little bit off. So I wouldn't exactly call it a conflict right away. It's just a little something, a little situation, a little incident that happens that makes us think, okay, this is where the story gets going. It's like the first sign of conflict. The rising action is actually just a series of problems all happening one after the other. You probably have your own series of rising action that happens throughout the day. Have you ever had one of those days where the day gets started, you're up, and then it's just like one thing after the other happens? Like you've had a bad day and it's because all these things happened. It's kind of like that in a book or a story or a video or a movie where you just start to see a series of issues all happening one after the other. That's the rising action because it makes things worse and worse and worse as you go. So like I mentioned before, we're talking about the conflict, right? The rising action, let me go back for a sec. Remember how I said the rising action is a series of problems? Well, those problems are just conflicts, right? So some of the problems might be internal conflicts. Some of the problems might be external conflicts. So the rising action, if we go back to this, it's a series of problems all happening one after the other. But those problems can be internal, like they're things that the character is having to deal with on the inside, doubts, insecurities, emotional problems, things like that. Or it could be external problems. Okay, so problems with other characters, problems with the weather, problems with situations outside of the character's own self. Okay, so these are the types of conflicts that you're going to see in the rising action. Okay, so we're talking about this part right here, the rising action. Those are the series of problems that we're talking about. Those are the series of conflicts that we're talking about, okay? So as we said, the internal conflict can play a big role in rising action because these are a certain type of problem where people are struggling with something within themselves. And we see this in lots of stories, lots of videos where the character has an internal struggle. And then the character often has an external struggle. So the internal struggle is happening at the same time that the external struggle is happening. Okay, so it could be an external problem, like an outside problem with another character. It could be a problem with the weather or something happening in nature. It could be a problem with the group of people the character is with. But either way, internal conflicts and external conflicts make up the rising action. So if we just go back here real quick, where we look at the rising action, it's a series of conflicts that are usually internal or external, or they could be both, okay? And this is what creates so much interest in stories. When a story is really, really good, you can't put the book down, you can't like hit pause on the movie or whatever. It's because the conflicts are so well done. There's so much going on, you have to keep watching. Okay, so yeah, so that's where we are. Okay, so we're actually going to, remember, we're just reviewing the elements of plot, right? So we're actually going to watch a story video, okay? We're going to watch Jack and the Beanstalk. It's a very well-known story, so it doesn't matter if you've seen it before or not, because the point is that we want the story fresh in our minds. And in that story, we're going to see these items happen. We're going to see the exposition, okay? We're going to learn about the main character and the basic setting, like the time and the place. We're going to see the internal and external conflicts in the rising action. We're going to learn where the turning point or the climax of the story is, where it seems like Jack just cannot get out of the situation that he's in. And then we're going to get some examples of falling action which lead to the resolution or the conclusion of the story. So what we're going to do right now is, if you have access to YouTube, I want you to go over to YouTube. I don't know if you can click on this link right here. It's probably not clickable in the video, but head over to YouTube. It could be on your phone, on whatever device you have that you're allowed to use right now, and type in Jack and the Beanstalk video. Okay, go to YouTube, type in Jack and the Beanstalk video, and then we're gonna complete the next plot activity together after you've had a chance to watch that.